Welcome to Big Brave Business. This is the podcast where we answer big questions reshaping entrepreneurship. I'm Sarah K. Heater, and this is Season 3. Each week, I'm bringing on my friends, mentors, and some of the best thought leaders I know. We dive into bold, values-driven conversations about leadership, equity, ethics, and building businesses that actually make a difference. Ready to do business better? Let's dive in. Welcome back to Big Brave Business. We're here with another fun conversation with a group of some of my favorite people. I just am really excited about this conversation and really excited for you all to meet each other. How fun is this? So first, we're going to lead off with just brief introductions of who you're hearing from on this call. Going to be a lot of repeated voices. If you've been listening to this podcast for a while, actually you've heard from all of us before. So that is really exciting and fun. And if you are hopefully going to keep listening through Season 3, hopefully you'll keep hearing everybody back again as well. But if you're new to this podcast, my name is Sarah Heater. I am the host of Big Brave Business, and I'm a podcast producer and strategic consultant. How about you, Cheryl?
Hi, so I am Cheryl Ham, and I am an independent yarn dyer and subscription box owner.
Hi, Regyna Curtis. I help entrepreneurs break the burnout cycle.
Hello, I am Taina. I am a coach, facilitator, and podcast host as well.
Hi, I am Jacki, and I'm a client experience strategist and also a podcast host.
Yay! Okay, I'm so excited to talk to you guys. I say that every week, and actually my primary editor on my team is also my husband, and he says, teasing me all the time, let me guess, you're so excited, because really I start every episode that way. I just love our podcast, okay? But the big question we're talking about today is about toxic productivity and hustle culture. And I want to preface this with some context, which is I think it's pretty safe to say we all reject hustle culture, and also we all find ourselves hustling. And in some ways, I don't know if you guys can relate to this, but I also kind of love a hustle. I'm not going to be ashamed to admit that. I think that we wouldn't be entrepreneurs if there wasn't part of us that had that drive. So the question is, in agreeing, right? It's not big and brave to say fuck hustle culture. We all agree. But in agreeing that we hate hustle culture, how can businesses challenge toxic productivity and redefine success in a culture obsessed with the hustle?
That's a big question. Can I just kick things off real quick by sort of piggybacking on something that you just said? And that is, and I wrote this down because I wanted to make sure I talked about it here. And that is, yes, I am against toxic productivity. I am against the hustle culture. However, toxic productivity kind of feels good in the beginning. So for me, I feel like it's very tricky to recognize sometimes, and I have to check in with myself, because it doesn't start out oh, I'm going to be toxically productive today or this week. It's something that at first I'm working a little harder. I'm working a few extra hours. I'm maybe working at night. Sometimes I realize it's 5 a.m. and I haven't gone to bed yet. And it takes this burden off of me because I've been stressed out, right? I started because I'm really stressed out and I'm really feeling heavy. My business is feeling heavy. Something is just weighing on me, and I feel like I have to get this work done. And when I do, yes, it was hard, but I feel better. I feel that weight has been lifted off of me. But then it snowballs and it snowballs, and I'm kind of chasing that high, right? I want to keep getting that feeling. And then suddenly I realize, well, I'm not getting more done. I'm actually now in a really bad place, and I'm exhausted and I'm getting burnt out, and I feel frustrated that weight isn't still coming off of me. It's because the work never ends, right? It keeps piling up. And so I just want to acknowledge that it feels good at first, and it can be hard to realize when you're just getting a few extra things done, and when you're going over that cliff into some unhealthy behavior. It's hard for me to find that sometimes.
I like to rethink hustle and just change the wording for myself. Because I think when people hear anti-hustle, they think you're not willing to work hard for your business. And I think there's a difference between hard work and hustle. And for myself, hustle becomes that unintentional, I'm doing the things to do the things because it feels good, even though I don't really know how it's going to move things forward. It's not necessarily in alignment with my values any longer. Whereas that hard work that I like to put in as a business owner, because I think entrepreneurs all like to do that. Yeah, it still aligned with my values. I'm still considering the priorities in my life and where that time should be devoted, and not just because I can go into the flow of my business and not come up for air for hours or days. But is that getting in the way of the rest of my life that I also consider a priority? So I personally like to choose, I still work hard. I try not to hustle. I still do occasionally, but so that's kind of how I reframe it in my brain.
This is all like so in my wheelhouse. Like this is my wheelhouse, I think. And for me, it's all about recognizing the signs before you get to the point of burnout, right? So there are always going to be times when you are really productive. There are going to be times as a business owner when you need to be more productive than you want to be, or that your body wants to be. The key to this is to understanding the indicators in your body and then having a support system in place to support that. So maybe you do have to kind of push through a project, but do you have to do it like all in one chunk, or can you do it, take a 5-minute break, come back, right? Like the thing that makes hustle culture toxic is that it is pushing through with no, like it is just push, keep pushing and keep pushing without taking your humanness into account. And so if you can take your humanness into account, then that is productivity that is not toxic.
I want to offer some nuance to this conversation. Not that it isn't already nuanced. Like I think I agree with what Cheryl said about it does feel good. Like I have big earth sign energy. And so that sense of accomplishment that I get when I'm hustling hard feels really, really good to me. I'm like, yes, I'm getting shit done. Like this is exactly where I need to be. But I think the thing that often is removed from the conversation about toxic productivity and toxic hustle culture is how rooted it is in white supremacy culture. And coming off of, like, we're recording this in March, coming off of Black History Month and having facilitated Black History Month learning sessions for a bunch of different orgs all around the country and some international, like, I cannot divorce toxic productivity and toxic hustle culture from what was happening on the plantations, right? Especially as a Black woman. And so when you look at the way that enslaved peoples were bought and sold, when you look at their quotas that they had to fill, like even something as simple as like the invention of the cotton gin, right? This is a point that I try to make in every presentation that I do, because usually when we're taught about the cotton gin, we're taught how it helped to speed up production. And so it made life easier for people on the plantation. Well, that's actually not the whole truth. The whole truth is that because it sped up production, it required more labor, which required more violence, which required more separation of families, which required longer hours. Right. And so there's this side to toxic productivity and hustle culture that has its underpinnings, its root in this very violent history in the founding of this nation, right? That we cannot talk about it without addressing that. And I think for me as a small business owner, what I try to do is self-evaluate, like how much of this is me feeling like I need to produce because that's what I feel like my worth is tied to, because that is literally how enslaved peoples were how they were valued. The more you produce, the higher dollar amount someone could get for you, and also the higher income they were getting, like their profit margin increased, right? So there's this whole economic system that's tied to the worth of bodily labor, the worth of productivity. How much you can do is how much you're worth. And so dealing with toxic productivity, like we have to deal with the root of it. Like all of these strategies that have been discussed so far, these are great. But if you don't deal with the root of it, you're going to find yourself back in that same position of having to redo and reevaluate and check in with your body and ask yourself, why does it feel good for me to be so productive at the cost of my health, at the cost of my relationships? And so I think I wanted to throw that out there to make sure that we are addressing like the not just like strategies, but also like the root of the issue that I think is the burden for a lot of us.
Yeah, thank you for adding that nuance and for bringing that into the discussion, because at the forefront of the discussion, because I wanted to pose that question as well, to say, how do you see, all of you see, things like race, gender, and other aspects of our cultural identity impact our perspectives on productivity, hustle, burnout? Because I think that is a really important nuance. And I think that it's a good example of how white supremacist culture and the toxicity of white supremacy affects all of us, since 4 of us on this call are white women. And I think that we're all able to express how that's affected us too. And understanding that perspective of how that's rooted in this concept of white supremacy, that your value is based on how hard you work. That was one of the most mind-blowing things that I started challenging right when I left the 9 to 5, was like posing this question: what if hard work isn't a virtue? What if hard work is neutral? What if how hard you do or don't work is neutral? Because we have this culture around your value being related to how hard you work and your output, right? Like you said. But you know who's not affected by that is the people who are worth the most. They don't work hard. They've never known a day of hard work in their life. So it's absolutely a myth that it's a socially fabricated lie that our worth fluctuates with our productivity or our output. Our worth as a human isn't related to that, but we have to challenge that norm in society as far as how we perceive each other too, because there are so many perceptions and stereotypes of what it means to be lazy, especially disproportionately affecting Black people and especially Black women and other women of color. Like, this is a huge obstacle that has to be overcome in like the perception of people. So what do we do about that? Because it's one thing to have strategies for ourselves. Like, this is how I overcome, this is how I avoid burnout. And I think there's so many podcasts about that. But how do we change? Like you mentioned the root cause, Taina, like how do we change the public perception or our perception of other people, or the assumptions we're making about others, even our children? I think a lot of people on this call have kids, right? Or of various ages, but like, I find that we have a tendency to even slip into this about our kids, like, oh, why are you being lazy? And I've really tried to challenge that in myself of like, hey, what's going on with you? Like, what is preventing you from wanting to show up here as I maybe had expectations that you would? Because usually there is a reason, and it's not because they're lazy, right? So but that's a hard thing to like retrain your brain. What do you guys think about that?
I think for me, it starts with language again. I know I was raised with the have a good work ethic, quote unquote. And that usually meant you worked really hard and you filled the hours and you were never sick and all these other things. You were there for your employer. And as soon as I started to realize, oh, wait a minute, what does work ethic really mean? And how is that being tied to my value as a person? That started shifting things for me. And so when I talk to my son, I try to be careful of the language I use when it comes to when he talks about work. And he says he's taking time off for a reason, not assume he's being lazy, like everybody would tell me a Gen Z would be, but ask, why did you decide to take time off? And he usually has a really good reason for it. It's not just that he's lazy. And sometimes it's okay to just rest and take time off to rest as well.
But I think that we need to, in all of the ways that we can, embody this and show people how to do it, right? Like as an entrepreneur, and as a have a lot of earth energy too, right? I'm a Capricorn sun. Like I can work all day and all night and actually really enjoy it and not get burnt out by that if I'm doing the work that really does light me up, right? I also can pour my whole self into doing something to try to receive that external validation. And I did that for years in the corporate world, right? Like just like you were talking about how a lot of the habits that we see today and that root cause comes from the traditions of and the practices of slavery. Also, the corporate structure was built on a male centric structure, right? And the women stayed home and dealt with the stuff in the house, and the men went to work, and there wasn't really a balance between taking care of yourself physically and emotionally and mentally and showing up physically and mentally at work. There was a big disconnect there. And so as entrepreneurs, if we show up in that way, we honor ourselves and we practice that and we do it out loud and we talk about it and we give examples of doing that, then we show others that that is not only possible to be successful in our own definition of success without subscribing to those ways of being. And it gives other people the courage or the at least like the curiosity to be like, wait, could I do that too? And then that permeates out, right? That has this ripple effect outward.
Yeah, I think something that I'm sure everyone on this panel in this conversation has done this or is in the process of doing this as well. It's like figuring out what success actually means. Like we're taught that success looks a certain way and acts a very specific way. And when I first started my business, I was like, oh, well, I have to have all these things and I have to like talk a certain way and dress a certain way and say the right things or go to the right conferences or connect with the right people. And that's what success looks like, right? That's how you emulate success. And once I do that, then, I'll have all the money in the bank and I will be a very successful coach. And it's like, it doesn't work that way. Like at the individual level, success is going to be different for every small business owner, I think, because our needs are different, right? Our experiences are different. But I think when we're talking about like bigger businesses, or even if like you have a team, if you're a small business with a team of people, like making sure that you are defining success, not just in the traditional sense in terms of like money in the bank and scale and impact and things like that, but also what does it look like to have a successful team that's happy with the work that they're doing, that isn't going to turn over every like 18 months. And then you have to put all this effort into rehiring that position, right? Which affects your bottom line. Like we know, because it's been studied, that like hiring a new person costs more than just, generally speaking, costs more than just like promoting someone internally or keeping the same employee, right? And so figuring out how to set holistic and adaptable, successful metrics for you and for your team, I think are going to be really important. And that doesn't mean that they're always in opposition, right, to the ways that we operate inside of capitalism. But I think the important thing is like, it doesn't have to end there. And I think for so many people, that's where it ends. Like that's the end all be all. And that is not a sustainable way to operate when we're talking about human beings, right? Who have a plethora of needs that exist in and outside of a working environment.
I think that poses such an interesting question. And I'm curious for all of you, like what your personal definition of success looks like where you are right now. And also how that's changed from where you started. Because I know for me, one of the things that's been frustrating, I'll say, I don't know if that's the right word, but yes, like making more holistic goals that are not just specifically money driven, but also like, as I've gotten better at having boundaries, prioritizing relationships, prioritizing rest, prioritizing play, I also have seen the rise, like all of us have, in this kind of cozy entrepreneurship movement. And I'm not opposed to people who that's right for them, but there's also a part of me that's like, okay, but we still do live in capitalism. And like, my money goals are not just to become as rich as I can become, right? Like, there's value attached to my money goals that is, and maybe it's forced me to give this more thought, right? When people talk about like, we talked about this briefly on this podcast before, but when you talk about like what is your enough number and that kind of language, and you guys are nodding, so I think you've seen the same kind of conversation going on online. For me, my enough number is not $4,000 a year and I'll just like spend a lot of time coloring, as much as that sounds great. The reality is that I want to create financial security for myself and for my children. And financial security for me means that we're not one emergency away from catastrophic crisis. It means that we know that there's going to be a roof over our heads at the end of a lease. It means that my kids have options when they wake up in the morning, right? Like I want that for us. I want access to healthcare. I want access to, and not just like basic needs, but also I want to travel. I want to see the world. I want to have relationships with you all around the country, right? And I want to be able to go see you in person, or for you to be able to travel as well. Like, and that all requires access to resources because we do live in a capitalist society. And so I think like I feel resistance sometimes when I'm engaging with kind of this cozy entrepreneurship language that's or messaging online, not because I disagree with like avoiding burnout. Yes, sure, of course. So part of me is like, yes, I want to like it. And do I only have resistance because I'm struggling with my own like white supremacist tendencies toward hustle culture and toxic productivity, because toxic productivity feels kind of good? Like, is that why I'm having resistance? Or am I having resistance because like, no, actually my goals are totally holistic and they're based on values. So anyways, I'm curious where you're all at. What's your current kind of perspective on success, and how has that changed, and what are you struggling with? I don't know, all the things.
So I started my business because I hated my corporate job, right? And I think that's probably a story a lot of people can relate to. So I worked in a business to business corporate sales job where I was a commissioned based salesperson. And so pretty much every dollar I made was tied to how many hours I put in, how much I worked. And it was also a very male dominated industry. And it was also a culture where you were expected to come in early and stay late and put in all this other time. And it really didn't matter what else you had going on. It didn't matter what your life was. Like, your life was work. According to your company, nothing else mattered but what you did here at work. And it was too bad if you liked it or not. And so I knew I wanted to get out of that situation. And I wanted a lifestyle that I felt comfortable with. Like, I wanted to be comfortable in my own skin again. I wanted to feel not so stressed out all the time and not have every single thing that I do be tied to how much money I'm making all the time. But when I worked my business up to a point where I could actually leave my sales job, I told my parents that this is what I was doing. And my father was sort of horrified. And because to him, in the generation that he was from, and in his mind, the only way that you could really be a respectable adult was to have a 9-to-5 job. It didn't matter if you liked it. It didn't your happiness had zero to do with anything. But you needed to get up every day, go to work, do what you did, and then come home. And then as long as you did that for your 40 to 60 hours a week, you were a successful, respectable adult. And if you didn't do that, then there was something wrong with you. And I remember he said, like, why would you do that? Like, you make a decent amount of money. Why on earth would you do that? This is the worst possible thing you could ever do for yourself. And it was really hurtful. But I did it anyway because, like, parents, right? So I did it anyway. And in my why in my business, and what I have always tried to put in the forefront, and when I am feeling like I'm just sometimes working for the wrong reasons, I check in with myself. And I remember that I started this so that I could have success, which to me meant freedom. It meant that I had, yes, financial freedom, but what did that money do for me, right? Because money for the sake of money, in my opinion, doesn't really do a whole lot, right? Money is a means to an end sometimes. And how much you need is really dependent on what you want in life. So you don't need to be a millionaire to be happy and be successful if your needs are being met. And so for me, that is what success is just having that freedom to do what I want. And if that means I work at 10 o'clock at night, then I work at 10 o'clock at night and I schedule a doctor's appointment at 2 in the afternoon, then I can do that. And I don't know, I just feel like that's really what it is for me. And it's hard for me to come to that place because I'm an Enneagram 3. And so I get a lot of my self-worth from the outward appearance of success. I want to look successful outwardly and inwardly. I want to be successful. And so it's hard to balance what society views as successful versus what I view as successful. And I don't think that there's a large portion of society right now that deems having a lifestyle that you love as being successful. They're like, okay, well, you love your life, but you can't shop at the best places or you can't go on vacations every year. So maybe you're not successful because you're not going to Hawaii every year for a week or something. And it's hard because people will ask like, oh, well, where are you going on vacation? And I might say, well, nowhere, but it doesn't mean I'm not successful. It's hard.
I really want to like interject for a second to like take a side note. I want to keep talking about the success thing, but I also want to like, I feel really strongly about this point as well, that like as an entrepreneur and my reason and my definition of success is very similar, right? I want to be able to do the things I want to do for as long as I want to do them, when I want to do them. That has been my thing the whole time. And it still remains that. And all of the goals and the numbers and things that lead up to that are a part of it. But what I really want to like point out for a second is that all of your friends and family, all of your colleagues, all of your supporters, all of the people who see you in that job that are like, oh, you're so miserable, or oh, you're so overworked, or oh, you're so underpaid, whatever it is, right? They're right there cheering you on. And then you take this leap and you go into entrepreneurship and you have to build it, right? It doesn't just, contrary to what you see on the internet, it doesn't just happen overnight. And you don't just suddenly go from like burning yourself out in your corporate career to living in luxury retreats around the world whenever you want and working from your laptop on some island in Greece. It's not how it doesn't happen in quite that order and that succession right away. And so you lose a lot of supporters. And you get a lot of doubt, like the same people who were saying like, oh, you've got to make a change will suddenly then be like, oh, that's not the right thing. They like this fear comes in. And so I think that why I really wanted to bring this in is because that underlying success story, that vision that you had that took you on that leap, that took you down that path is essential to your success. And it is the vision that you keep moving toward, not burning yourself out and head down and pushing forward, but like the thing that you are devoted to. And everyone else will probably forget that at some point along the way. You cannot forget that. It's true. It is the key.
I want to add something real quick that kind of both of you are touching on, something you had said, Sarah, too, is like, how do we change it? And I know for me, so I run a small team of about 8 people now. And one way I'm trying to change it is we don't work 40 hours a week here in the studio. We're not open. We work from about 9 to 2:30, 4 days a week. And when people say like, oh, well, we're really busy. Do you want me to come in? Do you want me to work extra? I always tell people, like, if you would like to, because you'd like to take on a few extra hours, like you are welcome to, but it is not required. We will figure it out. But I am never going to say like, oh, well, we want to achieve this goal. And so now I need more and more and more from my people. I am always trying to say like, take the time off that you need for yourself. If you have something going on with your family, you need to deal with that. And it's not about just being here and working for the business all the time. And I think until people as business owners sort of put that out into the world, then I don't think society is going to see things any differently. I think it's just going to continue on the way it always has.
I love that you shared that, Cheryl, because I think that's a really important point. As business owners, we have an opportunity to create new models for how to exist within a capitalist system. And that is an incredibly potent place to be. And yes, it's challenging, and yes, it's hard. And one of the things that I am still figuring out and still navigating is that I'm a great coach and facilitator. I am not a great business owner, right? Those are different skills, right? And so, but even with all the challenges, even with all the learning and education, I still have to get my hands on in order to be successful at both of those things. Like, I get to model a different way of doing business for people. And if that changes the perspective of a handful of people that are on my email list or that take me on to facilitate professional development for their team or whatever, then that is a measure of success for me, right? That's part of how I measure my success, by the impact of the work that I do, but also by the impact of who I am and how I stay in integrity with my values as a business owner. And speaking to the cozy entrepreneur thing really quickly, like I've seen that too. And I started my business because, one, I didn't know what else to do. And two, like, I have a chronic disability. And so I need the flexibility of having my own business. And so for me, like this whole movement of like the cozy entrepreneur, like that resonates with me to one degree, because I'm like, yes, that's the kind of lifestyle, like, I have to live. I didn't choose into this. I didn't opt into it. Like, I need to take a nap in the middle of the day, most days, right? But I think for a lot of what we see on social media in regards to this whole cozy entrepreneur movement, it feels like it's coming from a place of privilege. Like, a lot of these people have or might have like partners or families, generational wealth, things like that, where they don't have to hustle. They don't have to work hard. And that is an incredibly privileged place to be. Like, you have your quote unquote side hustle, but it's really just a hobby for you that you occasionally or can make money off of. And so I think that's where it feels really misaligned for me in terms of values, where it's like, no, I still fucking work hard. My hard just looks different from your hard because I have a chronic disability. So my 100% is going to look to you like maybe 50% or 70%, maybe 20% if I have a really bad day. So I wanted to just point that out, because I think that that's a big point of frustration for me as someone in the disability community, where it's like, okay, that's really not what it's about. Like, it's about redefining success for yourself in a way that fits with, like Cheryl was saying, the lifestyle that you want to have, but also that you might need to have. And as with everything on social media, it gets co-opted and turned into something that it's not.
White women love to do that. Take something that's rooted in like making meaningful change and then make it about them. Yeah. So I think I want to connect something that you said, Taina, with something you said, Cheryl, as well. This part of what is so valuable about having these conversations among business owners, and to be challenging these things as business owners, and especially for those of us who have teams of any kind, is that the best way we can then challenge those norms is based on exactly what didn't work for us. So for example, Cheryl, you talked about having a corporate job where the more hours you worked, the like more you were rewarded, basically, right? Or the more kind of success that you had. Now you've created this team structure where it's like nobody overworks. That's not what we're doing, except maybe you. That's not what we're doing here, right? And Taina, same with what you were just saying, like, you have this perspective about your own chronic diagnosis that has led to, I need rest during the day. Well, that would make you the most empathetic manager of a team of people to be able to say, like, yeah, there's an expectation that taking rest is necessary, not a hindrance to your job performance. I don't know a single US based company that would build that into their team dynamic, that there's an expectation that you rest because your body needs it, your brain needs it. Like it's literally a requirement for humans that's not incorporated into our like kind of corporate structure. So I think that's one of the things that I'm always kind of trying to challenge. And that's part of why Big Brave Business means so much to me as a podcast, because I always say like what I get out of this is not so much like leads for my business, which would be great. If you all want a podcast and you are looking for a podcast manager, would love to work with you. Also, please send me all of the people who align with your values, who also want a podcast. Like, of course, duh. But actually the thing that I get the most out of this is making me better at my job, how I serve clients, how I run my team, the way I make decisions in my business. I want to take into consideration the perspectives I don't necessarily have because of my own lived experience from the people who I'm having these conversations with. And I hope that's what you all take away too, both on this call and listening, right? That when we think about how we want to structure our team, we get to challenge everything. Like we literally get to make it up.
I had a big light bulb moment when it came to like building teams and the kind of culture I wanted to have. Chani Nichols, she's an astrologer. She has an app. She's got a team. And at one point in time, I saw one of their job postings and I was like, oh, this one was awesome. I want to go work for them. And I opened up the posting and I saw not a single person on the team will make under $80,000 a year. Everybody gets unlimited time off and you get a stipend to go with that so you can actually afford to do something during your time off. There's menstrual leave. There's just this huge long list of things that flies in the face of the corporate world. And they're a multi-million-dollar business and they just keep growing. And it was like, oh, wow, you can be quote unquote successful in the eyes of capitalism and still treat your team as if they're humans with other needs. And all of the things, like they have time off for domestic violence. If you're trying to get out of a domestic violence situation, they will give you time off without question. They're not going to ask you if you're actually menstruating. If you say you're taking menstrual leave, you're taking menstrual leave. And it was just like, wow, okay, this is the kind of business I want to have. And that is when I actually started to look at my business as a political act, an activist act, because that is a way to challenge all of these norms that we have. So if they can do it, why the heck couldn't I start building teams and cultures the way I want to?
I love that. I have to say, like, I've noticed over the last, well, not just noticed, but I keep seeing like over several weeks, over several months since January, that I have a background in education. And so I worked in higher ed for a long time and I worked in schools and education. And obviously there's a lot happening in that space right now. And as I'm seeing people at huge, respectable universities going through their websites and taking out words like gender, woman, diversity, inclusion, like just all these words from their website so they don't lose federal funding. I was like, can I swear on this show? Fuck that, right? Fuck that. I'm putting that all over my website. I am saying those words as much as I can say them. I am showing up in that way. And because I was like, I'm not federally funded, right? And I have a responsibility to show up and use my platform and use my voice to help other people use their voice, to bring them into that, to give them the tools they need, whatever it is. Because I was like, as I'm watching this happen around me, I'm like, if this is what's falling down, what am I building, right? What am I bringing into the space? Anyway, I don't know, something you just said about being political activism through your business. I was like, yeah, I definitely feel that right now.
So I wanted to also, this is kind of circling back to the beginning of the conversation a little bit, but I had a light bulb moment, Cheryl, at the very beginning when you like took the lead on answering the initial, like, let's start talking about this question, not answering, what's the answer? There's no answer, but in responding to the question first, right? So talking about toxic productivity feeling good. And what I found myself thinking first was, at what point is productivity toxic? Because just being productive is not inherently toxic, right? It's important. Like we need it to function, and we all need to be productive members of society. However you define productivity, that's where it gets complicated, right? And at what point does it cross the line to being toxic? And what I had this kind of light bulb moment in listening to you talk about how it feels good for you, Cheryl, and chasing that high, is I had this, and this is a little bit of a trigger warning, but we're not going to dwell on it because that's not what this podcast is about. I had this kind of aha moment of my relationship with food feeling very similar, where I definitely have like a binge based personality where I am experiencing that in all things. So like right now in my hormonal cycle at the time of recording this, I'm in a massive place of craving like sugary foods, indulgent foods, rich foods. Like that's where I am right now in my cycle. And there's a definite relationship in how I feel with, like, at first that feels good. At a certain point, it feels terrible. Productivity is very similar to me. And I'm realizing that actually in my own personality, I can assess this for myself, that I think the habitual binging inclination is true for work as well. That's like an aspect of my personality that's not just about food. It's about and that's kind of what I do with productivity, is I'm like almost binging on productivity to the point where my husband will sometimes say, if I'm like in a funk or I'm feeling like kind of lost or I'm in a mood, and he'll be like, you just need to go work. Like, you're always happier once you work. Like, just go in your office and get some stuff done on your to-do list. And like, it's true. That does make me happy, which I don't know. I don't know how many people relate to that, not just because I love my business, but also like that is who I am in my nature. But I think, yeah, there's like a line, and kind of recognizing where productivity becomes toxic, that I don't know if I'm good at that. And I'm getting better, but I have that same problem in other aspects of my life. And I'm just kind of realizing that those inclinations, those habits do leak over in other ways. It's not just about productivity. But anyways, I don't know if that resonates with anyone, or if anyone wants to piggyback off that one. That was a vulnerable share. Let's be big and brave.
It resonates a lot. It resonates with me. And I think one way I know that it's toxic for myself is when I feel like I'm getting a lot done. I'm getting a lot done, but I don't feel good. I feel worse. I feel like the more I do, the more I have to do. And I start feeling angry about it. Like, I'm working so hard and look at all these things I'm doing. And I start to get that like self-righteous, I don't know, like I get into that really nasty place of like, what's going on here? And then I go, oh, I've done it. Like, so my inner Britney Spears, like, oops, I did it again, because I slide into it. And I have to always try to be so self-aware, because I think it's been ingrained in me for so long, and I am very against it. And I try very hard to create a culture in my workspace that does not promote it. However, it's very hard for me personally, and I always have to be checking in with myself. And I don't know, and the other thing is that sometimes I don't know how to relax. And so working is almost a crutch. It's almost like a coping mechanism, which sounds so bizarre, right? But if I'm home and I don't have something to do, like specific, if I don't have a specific job to do, or I'm procrastinating doing something else that I don't want to be doing.
Working.
I know that one.
Yep.
Work is kind of like, I know what I have my list. I know what I need to do, and I can just pull that up and get to it, because there's always a million things. Yeah. And so, and if I am relaxing and I don't have something specific to do, I feel guilty. I feel guilty because I do have these other work related things that are waiting on me. And sometimes it's team members that can't move forward in their job because they need me to finish something, but I'm currently not working. It's not my work hours. And so I feel like I have to be relaxing during those times. I don't know. It gets really confusing about when it's okay to not work and when it's okay to put in those extra hours, it's not easy to figure that out.
One thing that I have been trying to implement, I had a really bad medical scare last year. And so recovery has been long and daunting and enduring. And so one thing that I've been trying to implement is like this, I call it the 80-20 rule, where it's like keeping a reserve of energy for a just in case scenario. And so I think most of us are trained to go until we can't anymore. But then if something unexpected happens, then there's nothing left for that, right? And something always unexpected happens. Like the only thing we know about life is that it's unpredictable. Change is constant. Life is unpredictable. You're going to need a new roof at some point. Your car is going to break down. Your dog is going to get sick. Your mom is going to be in the hospital. Like there's always something that life is going to require of you. And if you just keep going until you, like with work specifically, until you have nothing left, then you have nothing left. And so keeping a reserve of energy for myself has been really instrumental, not just in my recovery, but also in making sure that like there's something there, not just for me at the end of the day, but what if a new client wants to come on, right? Or what if a current client has a life emergency and needs a little additional support? Or what if a friend or a family member has a life emergency and needs a little additional support? And I know right now with the political climate that we're in here in the States, everyone's talking about community building, and it's always the right time to build community, right? But you have to have space for that in your life. And if you're giving 100% at work, there's no space for community because you barely have space for yourself, right? And that this is something that I have like coached my clients through, but it didn't become real for me until I had that medical scare last year. And then I was like, oh shit, like I have nothing to give. And it was like that for months. It was like that for almost an entire year, where it was like, I don't have anything because all my energy is going into this recovery. So how do I facilitate my own recovery and ease myself back into my business in a way that feels aligned and feels good? And it's like, it's making sure that there's a reserve for you at the end of the day.
I think it's interesting because our culture talks all the time about having an emergency fund, and we're always talking about money when we talk about emergency fund. And yes, you need capacity, energy, emergency fund as well. And it's one of the reasons when I help my clients set up systems, I'm like, don't do it based on the idea that you're going to always have 100% of your spoons, because you're never going to have 100% of your spoons. And so you need to set up your systems to just, maybe you have 2 spoons just on average. So set them up that way, because you need to leave something for yourself. And also life is life. It's like you said, unpredictable. You never know.
Well,
Yeah.
and I think one of the things that I do with my clients is I have them track their energy. I mean, the whole charting your core system that I created is built to help you understand your natural energy flows, right? When you're in your spring, summer, fall, and winter, when you have more outward energy and when you have more inward energy, right? All of this is a factor. But also, even aside from just kind of like the structure of knowing what that is throughout the year, is also setting up a system to make sure that you know how you're affected by certain external factors and have systems in place to support that. So knowing that if you're going into this kind of energy or this kind of environment, bring these tools with you because you're going to need them, right? And setting that up into the structure, in the infrastructure of your business, and having a business community, which I think community is a very utilized word and very much misunderstood word. Like most of what people are talking about when they talk about building community in the business sense is they're talking about an interactive email list. They're not actually talking about a community. And it's why I actually like pulled back in my own business to really like set up an infrastructure that supported people as a diverse community of different people doing different things at different times, so that it was a holistic framework rather than just being like, oh, all these people do my thing and they all know each other and they all interact in this one space. It's like, no, it's truly a community that has different people offering different things at different times. And that support for me individually was essential because I know I can't be everybody's everything all the time and also be that for myself. It's just not possible. And if I need that, other people need that too.
That was one of the most like mind-blowing things I think that I read, and it's related to what all of you have said, is this concept of like giving 100% and this like misconception that if I'm not, or even more than, right? Like kind of there's a stereotype of I'm giving 150%, I'm giving 110%, I'm giving 200%, right? Like the reality is we are giving 100% at all times, but to what, right? Like not to any one thing. Nothing ever gets 100% of us. There's a million things that are taking from us at all the time. And kind of this concept of like, and this is a really oversimplified thing, but if let's say what's going on the news, for example, as we've referred to a couple of times of like what's going on politically, right? Like if what's going on the news is taking, I'll even be kind of generous because at times it's significantly higher, like 40% of you only have 60% of you to give to whatever else is happening. So especially when people are disproportionately affected by what is going on, if something's happening that, especially, and again, this is still only talking politically, but if something's happening that's specifically targeting you or people who share your identity, then yeah, like, sorry, but showing up to Zoom is just not going to be, that's just not going to be it. But it's also how you show up to your relationships of all kinds. Speaking of community, right? Like, how can I show up? And I think this is where, and this is like such a can of worms to open right at the end of this conversation, but like, especially when we talk about ethical community and like the ethics behind community building, which we do have an episode kind of about this that came out in January, I think, about ethical community building. So if you want to listen to that, like definitely recommend. But I'm going to take this to a page out of Taina's book and take this to a race perspective and say that like, this is part of why when we talk about community, true community, like representation is so important, and having spaces that are specifically dedicated to not just race, but like all aspects of, I'm going to just use the DEI kind of catchphrase, right? Like DEIA, DEIB, like why this matters and why we need this is because there are times where, like, depending on especially what's going on in the world or in the news, a Black woman is just not going to have the same capacity to show up for white women as she is to show up for like in a community of people who share that identity and can understand what's going on. And I think we feel that like everyone on this call identifying as women, right? We go to, there are things for me that gravitate toward communities with women in mind, because things like, as you mentioned, Jackie, like menstrual leave, like taking cycles into consideration, Regyna said that too, like that's only going to happen in spaces led by women. That's not going to happen anywhere else. So I think there's things like that that just are really important in like what communities you're a part of, feeling like there's shared identity there. Okay, so this has been an incredible conversation. We could like talk all day, but unfortunately we can't because we all have other things to go do. But I like to end all of these discussions with, and it can be work related, but it doesn't have to be, something that is making you happy right now. Who wants to take it?
I can go first. So something that's making me happy right now, I have a podcast. I listen to podcasts, and a podcast that I came across late last year, BRB Crying. I'm not an overly emotional person. So I was like, oh, this sounds interesting. Like the whole premise is for them to cry. So like maybe this will help me get in touch with my emotions a little bit better. But one of the hosts recommended this fanfic book that they came across on Archive of Our Own. It's Harry Potter fanfic. It's called Draco Malfoy and the Mortifying Ordeal of Being in Love. And I've seen all the movies. I didn't read the books. Like that was not my journey with Harry Potter, but I was looking for something interesting to read and she mentioned it. And so like she mentioned it on Instagram, I think, and I like DM'd her and then she sent me the file and it was like over 500 pages long. And I was like, I don't know if I'm going to get through this. And I devoured it in 6 days. Like 2 nights, I was up till like the wee hours of the morning reading because I could not put it down. And I'm actually rereading it now because it is literally one of the best things I have ever read. And I'm like a voracious reader. And I haven't felt this way about a book in a really long time. And so I feel like I'm like rediscovering my love for reading through this experience. And so I have been talking to everybody about this fan fiction. I've like sent it to friends. Like I've mentioned it on my podcast. Like it's making me so happy right now. And so I just wanted to share it and throw it out there in case anyone's looking for some good fanfic to read.
I'm going to go off of the reading. A good friend of mine and myself, we have way too many books that we own that we haven't read yet. And because we're not in the mood at the moment. And so this past month, I was able to pick out her next 3 reads. And so she's required to read those. And then she was able to pick out reads for me. And so I'm looking forward to reading those books, but I'm also really looking forward to the books I picked out for her. I read years ago, and I've been dying for her to finish them so I could talk to her about them. So by the end of the month, hopefully that'll happen.
I love that idea. I'm going to go on the book theme, but I'm going to actually talk about, I'm writing a book right now, and it is bringing me so much joy to write the stories and to just be in that process. So that's bringing me a lot of joy right now.
I'm going to go a little bit of a different route here. And I'm going to say that something that's making me really happy right now is taking care of my mental health, because this year has been a struggle for me. Mm-hmm. And I have the saying, or I'm sure it's not my saying, but what gets measured gets managed. And sometimes we say we're taking care of our mental health, but we're not really checking in with ourselves. Like I keep saying that in this episode today, and it's because it's something that I've been doing a lot, but not just checking in with myself, but getting into therapy, exploring other ways to take care of my mental health, talking to my doctor, doing things like that. Because what I've realized is that if you're not doing great, like you don't have to suffer. Like there are things that you can do. And so that's something that I'm focusing on this year and currently right now, but hopefully now and going forward. So, and it's making me really happy.
Good. That's fantastic. Snaps for you, Cheryl, because that's a very big, brave thing to do. Pursuing mental health care is, I think, one of the bravest and biggest things you can do in your life. And so just sending you so much love for that. I'm going to actually also give you your flowers, Cheryl, because last year you came on this podcast and you came on to talk about the topic that hiring is a form of self-care. Hiring team is a form of self-care. So I've just added 2 members to PodFox, the team, and in a part-time, like I'll say VA capacity. I actually really like reject the term VA because I think it really undermines like the value that they bring. But they are virtual because my whole team's virtual, and they are assisting, which is fantastic. So it's still so new that we're in that onboarding phase where like the true like kind of ROI, if you were just to look at it as numbers, is not necessarily there at this point. But the promise of how much can now be delegated and how much more of these things that have been sitting on my to-do list or that have been goals or that have been a vision, but like we just don't have the capacity or the bandwidth to do is just tremendous. So that I'm feeling so excited and inspired by. So yeah. So also more snaps for Cheryl, because I think that idea, that premise that hiring help is self-care really resonated and stuck with me. And feel like I'm living it right now. So now I'm like, I'm going to hire all the things. Like, hang on, I'll give away all the money I'm making to make all the things happen. So no, I'm just kidding. But that it does feel good. So thank you all so much for joining me on this journey, for getting big and brave and vulnerable about the things and the stuff and sharing. And some of this conversation, I think, is a bit challenging. And so I appreciate that. Thank you for bringing that energy and for matching it and being here with me, and for you listening. Thank you to you too for sticking in there with us, and we'll see you next week.